Hey folks, I'm Jack Fossett, and welcome to this guitar shootout between the Epiphone Sheraton II and the Epiphone Riviera Custom P93. Now these are two budget-friendly, really cool semi-hollow body guitars that are great for a number of genres, kind of specifically Americana genres, blues, rock, jazz. You could play them for country, you could play them for a number of things. They don't really get into high-gain territory, but I think generally if you're a high-gain player, you're probably not going to look at one of these guitars. That being said, they could probably push some cool, like, up to 80s rock territory, you know, if you can kind of control the feedback a little bit. But anyway, let's dive right in. So we're going to start off with the Epiphone Sheraton II. This is a made-in-China Sheraton II. This is not the Sheraton II Pro. This does not have the push-pull pots, but it's not an older one from the Peerless factory. The kind of Mickey Mouse ears were shaped a little bit differently on this one. So this is a more recent Sheraton II, but not a Sheraton II Pro. This is a great guitar. It has a nice, comfortable neck. It's got some weight to it, you know, again, due to the center block. It's surprisingly bright, and it's surprisingly aggressive for what it is. And the humbuckers are actually really good quality. You know, sometimes with a more budget-friendly guitar, you kind of expect, well, you know, maybe the hardware and the pickups and the wiring won't be quite as good. But this is one of those guitars that when I got it, I kind of went, no, I don't really feel the need to change anything in it. I think it just sounds good. And even hardware-wise, you know, it came with gold Grover tuners. You know, it's got this beautiful inlay in the headstock, and it's just a really stunning guitar. It's a nice guitar. Again, it's comfortable to play. Now, the interesting of these two model guitars is the vintage models that these are inspired by were actually much more similar than their modern counterparts, and so let me explain that a little bit. It used to be that the Riviera was kind of like a lower-end Sheraton, and but the pickups and things have changed. But if you looked at the guitars side by side, it was almost similar to like the difference between an ES335 and an ES355, or maybe 345. But basically, the Sheraton had some fancier inlays. It had kind of, you know, it had like gold parts and things, and it was a little bit nicer. The headstocks were similar, but, you know, of course, you always had this beautiful inlay in the Sheraton headstock. Now, they both, the vintage models both would have had mini humbuckers, and they're both semi-hollow body guitars, so it really was like, you know, with the Riviera, you got more of a plain top well, they mostly, I think, came in like a cherry sunburst, and you had the two mini humbuckers, and then it didn't have, you know, quite the fancy inlays. It more had the trapezoid inlays like an Epiphone Casino. So it was essentially a very similar guitar, just this one, you know, the Sheraton had a few nicer appointments. Now, both of these guitars are very vintage styled. However, they're updated in that they both have different features from what the vintage ones were. So the big thing for the Sheraton is that they've switched over to humbucking pickups instead of mini humbucking pickups. And there is a difference in tone there. Mini humbuckers are a little bit more slender. They're kind of halfway between... I want to say they're halfway between a P90 and a humbucker, but that doesn't even quite do it the right justice. But they're not quite single coils, they're not quite humbuckers, they're somewhere in that middle territory. They're a little bit brighter, they're a little bit more slender. These humbuckers are really bright and aggressive in this model, and that's really cool. This is one of the few models that I've had where I don't really want to reach out and do anything to it. I think it just sounds great as it is. You know, it even came with gold Grover tuners. You know, of course, it's got gold parts and things. And it's a really nice sounding guitar. It has a lot of top end, it has a lot of bite to it, it has a lot of power. Because of the semi-hollow block in the middle, it's not going to feed back as much, even if you push it with a little bit of gain. The neck is really, really thick and comfortable on this one, you know, and again, of course, it has all these beautiful inlays in it. It's a really stunning guitar. So this is a great guitar if you want to really dig into some blues rock, again, into some rock and roll. But again, it'll also clean up really, really nicely. It has this really pristine clean with a nice shimmer on top. You can roll the tone off a little bit if you want to get some mellower jazzy tones. This is just an excellent guitar. It's a nice tribute to the original Epiphone Sheratons. Again, this one is, I want to say this one is closer to its vintage counterpart than the Riviera. Really being the big change is that it's got the humbuckers instead of the mini humbuckers. This one's, of course, in a, you know, this beautiful ebony finish and everything. It kind of screams BB King to me for some, you know, because it's the black with the gold. It reminds me of Lucille, even though Epiphone makes their own Lucille model. But this one just kind of makes me want to play, you know, BB King and Joe Bonamassa and stuff like that. That's the kind of vibe that I get from the guitar, and part of that is from those aggressive pickups. Part of that is because I know that I can get some really cool mellow tones, but I know I can really sink into this one too if I want to. Next up, we have the Epiphone Riviera Custom P93. Now, this one, I go into more detail on this on, I've done a whole demo video of this guitar, and you're welcome to check that out if you want more detail on it. This one is much more different than its vintage counterparts. They've made it a bit nicer with the finishes. Of course, it's got gold parts, which I don't believe the vintage ones for the most part would have had. Has the Bigsby, which is really, really cool. And rather than having dual mini humbuckers, it has 3 P90s. They're not P93s, they're P90s, and there's 3 of them. I've made that joke several times now in several different demos, and it's still funny. Now, the interesting thing about this guitar is that with this middle pickup, you can get a lot of different tones. So here's the quick overview. This could function as a 2-pickup guitar. This volume right here, is the middle pickup volume, and it's wired straight to the output. It's not wired to the switch. So the way that works is if you turn this volume off, this is like a 2-pickup guitar. You turn that volume off, and it basically just takes this out of the equation. You've got your, you've got your neck with volume, and then you've got your middle, which is a blend of the neck and bridge, and then you've got your bridge. Now, on any of those settings, if you roll this middle pickup in, you get some really cool out-of-phase tones, you get some blended tones, and I think it's a really, really neat feature. Typical of like classic Gibson guitars that had 3 pickups. They would have this, the middle wired to its own volume, like an old Les Paul Black Beauty. There were a number of different guitars that had this kind of style. The interesting thing is this headstock is actually more akin to what the vintage, both Sheraton and Riviera headstock. It was this more slender Epiphone headstock like you see on the Casinos. Now this one has gold vintage style tuners, and you know, it's kind of got that classic trapezoid inlay like I was talking about. So this is a really neat guitar. It's a really neat, you know, and again, it's interesting because it's like, it's not like the vintage version, but I wouldn't call it a modern version because it's not a push-pull pot. You know, it's not like it has locking tuners or anything wacky. It's almost like a new vintage style. You know, but this deep wine red is just really, really beautiful. It really suits it with the gold and everything. This is just a super classy guitar. Now, comparing it to the Sheraton, the interesting thing about this one is with P90s, you would expect this one to be a little bit brighter and have a little bit more growl, but I actually found the opposite. I found that these are kind of mellower P90s. This guitar is a little bit darker sounding than the Sheraton is, and the P90s are not quite as aggressive as the humbuckers are. So Now, they sound really cool. They're a really cool guitar. This is one that, you know, I might be more inclined to do something like swap out the wiring for higher value pots. And with the Bigsby, you know, there are a couple of things. Tuning issue-wise, I really haven't used the Bigsby much because Bigsbys are just, they're just hard to keep in tune, and that's true of, and you know, it's like, I have a 59 Gretsch 6120 reissue. I mean, it's a real top-of-the-line Gretsch guitar, and that has a Bigsby, you know, with the kind of rocker bridge, and the Bigsby takes that one out of tune. So Bigsbys just don't hold tune particularly well. That's just kind of the way that they are. This one could benefit from a roller bridge, I think. You know, maybe if you wanted to get a new nut for it, like a graphite or a tusk nut or something, I think those things would probably help. And the other thing for me is I just don't use the Bigsby. You know, it looks really nice. It's really, really cool. I'm not disappointed that it has it, but I just don't really use it that much. You know, I'm not really a heavy tremolo player, so that's not too much of an issue. The only other qualm I've had with this one is that my pick hits that middle pickup, and that's only an issue if it's turned on. If it's turned off, of course, it doesn't matter, but when it's turned on, if your pick hits that middle pickup, you can kind of get some pops and things, so you may need to slightly adjust where you pick, or a finger pick or something. It's not at all a deal breaker. It's just, you know, with the Sheraton does not have that third middle pickup, so you can really kind of just dig right in if you want to. This one, you might have to finesse it a little bit more if you like using that third pickup. That being said, you know, the Bigsby and the third pickup also open up a new world of tones. You can get tremolo tones from this. You can get those cool out of phase quacky tones from this. So this one has more versatility. That one is, the Sheraton is a little bit more aggressive and, you know, maybe a little bit better for rock. This one has more versatility. So out of the two, I mean, I honestly don't think you can really go wrong either way. I do think the Sheraton is probably slightly a step up as far as, you know, quality. Again, it comes with nicer tuners and just little things like that. I think, you know, kind of in general, it's a slightly better put together guitar. But that being said, I mean, they're really comparable. You know, believe it or not, the Sheraton we used was actually cheaper than this one was, and so, you know, used, and so you can't go wrong. There's, you know, it's honestly kind of a, which one suits your tone better, which one do you like better, and that's the one that you should go with. And I don't think you can really go wrong either way. I think they're both great guitars. They're stunners. They're really nice to take to gigs. You know, people kind of look and they go, oh, that's a nice guitar, you know. So I think that I think these are two great options, and again, you can find them so reasonably priced used that it's almost a no-brainer to have one around if you want that semi-hollow tone. For this demo, I'm plugging into my Fender Bassman, using a couple of different pedals to get the tones. I'm using a DCW Tradition Overdrive, which is a hand-wired modified tube screamer, basically. It's from a small independent company who makes excellent pedals. I'm also using a one-control Prussian blue reverb to get a little bit of air behind the tone, and I'm tuning up with a NuX tuner. The intro song was an original jazzy instrumental called Jazz Noir. Feel free to check that out. I'll put a link to that actual song down below in the comments. Let me know, which of these guitars do you like better? Is it something where you want both? You kind of feel the need for both? Or does one really strike you as you like the tone better or you like the features better? Let me know in the comments. Start some discussion on it. I'm Jack Fossett. Thanks for tuning into this guitar shootout. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you next time.